Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. In today's video, imagine waking up to a SWAT team storming your family farm, all because your new HOA neighbors decided they wanted your land. For years they sent letters, called police claiming I was a trespasser on my own property, but that hostage hoax was the last straw. I'd had enough. I discovered a loophole in their precious HOA rules, one that gave me the power to turn the tables completely. Let's dive right into the video. The first story is titled HOA Keeps Calling Cops on Me, Claiming I Stole HOA Private Property. So let me start from the beginning. My great-grandfather bought this 40-acre farm back in the 1920s. It's been in our family for 4 generations now. I grew up here, learned to work the land from my father, and when he passed I inherited not just a property, but a way of life. We grow organic vegetables, keep chickens, and live simply. The land means everything to me. It is not just property. It's family history. About 20 years ago, everything started changing though. Developers bought up all the surrounding farmland and built a fancy housing development called HOA Karen Estates, name changed for anonymity reasons. Suddenly, my farm was surrounded by cookie-cutter houses with perfect lawns and white picket fences. The new homeowners formed an HOA, which was fine by me. I had my own land, they had theirs, and the original HOA charter explicitly excluded my property. The developers knew that they could not touch a farm that predated their development by decades, and honestly, the first wave of residents were decent people who understood the situation. Some even bought eggs from me and appreciated having a working farm in their neighborhood. But that all changed when the newer residents started moving in. So, about 5 years ago, the HOA board completely turned over. All the original reasonable people either moved away or got voted out by newcomers who had very different ideas about what the neighborhood should look like. These new board members had no respect for the history of the area or my family's rights to our land. It started small. I would get letters in my mailbox telling me my chicken coops were unsightly and violated community standards. I ignored them at first. After all, I was not a part of their HOA. But the letters kept coming, getting more aggressive each time. "Your property is bringing down everyone's home values," one letter read. "The smell from your farm is creating a nuisance for the entire community." Well, I finally decided to respond. I walked over to the HOA president's house, a guy who had moved in just 2 years earlier and somehow managed to get himself elected. His name was on all the letters I'd been receiving. "Look," I told him when he answered the door, "I appreciate that you want your neighborhood to look nice, but my farm is not part of your HOA. We were here first and we are explicitly excluded from your charter." He was a short, balding man who puffed up like a rooster when he got angry. "That exclusion is outdated," he snapped. "Times have changed. This is a residential community now, not some rural area. You need to adapt or move." "I'm not moving," I said firmly. "This is my family's land." "We will see about that," he replied before slamming the door in my face. That should have been my first warning that this guy was going to be trouble. Over the next few months, the harassment intensified. The HOA started claiming that my property actually belonged to them as common area and that I was illegally occupying it. This was completely ridiculous, of course. I had a clear title to the land going back nearly a century, plus all the original exclusion documents. But they didn't care about facts. The letters became threats. "You're trespassing on HOA property. Vacate immediately or face legal action." When I continued to ignore them, they escalated to calling the police. At first, it was maybe once a month. A patrol car would show up, I would explain the situation, show them my property documents, and the officers would leave. Most of the cops were understanding. They could see this was a civil dispute at best, but then the calls started coming weekly. The HOA president would call in reports claiming I was trespassing or stealing HOA property. Each time, I would have to stop whatever I was doing, walk the officers around my property, and explain the whole situation again. "This is harassment," I told one of the responding officers. "They are wasting your time and mine." The officer nodded sympathetically. "We know, sir, we've gotten multiple calls about this property. Unfortunately, we have to respond to every complaint, but we can see that you're the legitimate owner here." I thought about filing a complaint against the HOA for harassment, but I did not have solid proof that they were the ones making the calls. The police reports just listed anonymous complaints. I was frustrated, but I figured out eventually that they would get bored and move on. Well, I was wrong. The situation reached its breaking point on a Tuesday morning in early fall. And by the way, guys, if you would be in this situation, what would you do against the HOA if they started such a harassment campaign? Let me know in the comments, and please don't forget to like the video because that would help us tremendously. And by the way, in case you're wondering, I'm a guest reader on this channel and the channel belongs to my SO. So please don't report her for stealing my voice or something. Anyway, I was in the barn with my elderly neighbor, an 82-year-old man who had been helping me with farm work for years. He was practically family. He had known my father and grandfather, and even though he lived in a development now, he still loved coming over to help with the chickens and vegetables. We were just finishing up feeding the animals when I saw something. I saw vehicles racing up my driveway, not regular police cars, but black SUVs and an armored truck. "What the hell?" my neighbor muttered. Before I could answer, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "This is the SWAT team. Exit the building with your hands visible. Move slowly." My heart started pounding. I looked at my neighbor, who was white as a sheet. "Stay calm," I told him. "Just do what they say." We walked out of the barn with our hands up. There were at least 20 officers in full tactical gear, weapons drawn, pointing at us. It was like something out of a movie, except this was my farm, my home. "Get on the ground!" someone shouted. We both dropped to our knees and then flat on our stomachs. Officers swarmed us, cuffing us both before we could even ask what was happening. "What's this about?" I managed to ask as they pulled me to my feet. "We received a report of a hostage situation," the leader said. "Someone called in claiming you were holding a person against their will in that barn." "This is my neighbor. He helps me with farm work. There's no hostage situation here." It took 2 hours to sort everything out. They searched my entire property, questioned both of us separately, and finally released us when it became clear the whole thing was a hoax. The SWAT team was professional about it, but I could see that they were frustrated too. Nobody likes being sent on a wild goose chase, especially one that could have gotten someone killed. My chickens were traumatized by all the noise and activity. Several of them stopped laying eggs for a week. My neighbor was shaken up so badly, he did not come back to help for a month. Well, that night, lying in bed, I realized what had happened. The HOA had escalated from harassment to potentially deadly false police reports. They were trying to force me off my land through intimidation, and they had crossed a line that could have gotten someone killed. I'd had enough. So the next morning, I called a lawyer. I'd been avoiding legal action because I hoped the situation would resolve itself, but the SWAT incident changed everything. This was not just harassment anymore, this was dangerous. The lawyer I hired specialized in property law and HOA disputes. "This is clearly harassment," he said after reviewing my documents. "The false police reports are serious criminal matters." But here's the interesting thing. I've been looking at your HOA bylaws and there are some exploitable provisions here. He spread out copies of the HOA charter and bylaws on his desk. "Your property was excluded from the original HOA," he continued, "but that exclusion can be voluntarily waived by the property owner, meaning you could choose to join if you wanted to." "Why would I want to do that?" I asked. He smiled. "Well, because of this provision here about voting rights. So the HOA uses voting by acreage, aka each property owner gets votes proportional to their land size. It was designed to prevent tiny lot owners from outvoting people with larger properties." I started to see where he was going with this. "Your 40 acres would give you massive voting power," he explained. "Everyone else in the development has quarter-acre lots at most. You would control nearly 60% of the total votes in the HOA. So I could join the HOA and then vote out the people who have been harassing me?" "It is more than that," he said. "I've been looking at their financial records. They are public documents for HOA members. There are some serious irregularities here. Funds that should have gone to community maintenance have been redirected. Board members have been approving expenses that directly benefit their own properties, and the selective enforcement of rules is textbook discrimination." So my lawyer laid out a strategy that was both brilliant and completely legal. I would voluntarily join the HOA, run for the board, and then use their own rules and procedures to clean house. "Everything we do has to be by the book," he warned. "No shortcuts, no revenge moves. We use their system against them, but we do it legally and properly." I liked the sound of that. The first step was officially joining the HOA. I submitted my application at the next board meeting, which caused quite a stir. "You can't be serious," the president said when I handed him the paperwork. "After all your complaints about our rules, now you want to join?" "I've had a change of heart," I replied calmly. "I've realized that being part of the community is important. I want to do my part to maintain our neighborhood standards." The board members looked at each other suspiciously, but they could not legally refuse my application. The bylaws were clear. Any property owner could join by submitting the paperwork and paying the fees. 2 weeks later, I was officially a member of HOA Karen Estates. The next step was running for the board. There was an election coming up in 6 months, but I discovered that special elections could be called in if enough members petitioned for one. I started going door to door, talking to my new neighbors. Most of them were good people who had been frustrated with the current board for years anyway. I learned that the harassment was not limited to me. The board had been selectively enforcing rules, playing favorites with their friends, and ignoring complaints about real issues while focusing on petty violations. They sent me a violation notice for having my trash cans visible from the street, one neighbor told me. But the board president has had a broken fence for 2 years and nothing happens. They approved the treasurer's request to install a hot tub that violates the setback requirements. Another one said, but they made me tear down my kid's treehouse for being non-conforming. Within a month, I had enough signatures to call for a special election. I was running against the current president for a seat. My campaign strategy was simple: transparency and accountability. I promised to enforce all rules fairly, maintain proper financial records, and end the culture of favoritism that had developed here. The current president was furious. At candidate forums, he would rant about how I was an outsider trying to destroy the community character. This backfired spectacularly when other residents pointed out that I'd been living in the area longer than anyone else. OP has been our neighbor for decades, one longtime resident said at a community meeting. His family built this community. If anyone is an outsider here, it's the people who moved in 5 minutes ago and started causing problems. Well, the election was not even close, with my 40 acres giving me 60% of the voting power, plus support from fed-up residents. I won in a landslide. But that was just the beginning. My first act as a board member was to call for a complete financial audit. As an elected HOA official, I now had access to all the HOA records, and what I found was worse than my lawyer had suspected. The previous board had been embezzling community funds for years. The president had approved landscaping expenses that were actually payments to a company owned by his brother-in-law for work done on his personal property. The treasurer had been writing checks to herself for administrative fees that were not authorized in the budget. The secretary had approved variance requests for his friends while denying identical requests from people he did not like. I documented everything meticulously. Every suspicious transaction, every case of selective enforcement, every violation of their own bylaws, I was building a case not just for removal, but for criminal prosecution. At the next board meeting, I presented my findings. These financial irregularities represent clear violations of the board members' fiduciary duty, I announced. We have documentation of funds being diverted for personal use, which constitutes embezzlement. We also have evidence of discriminatory enforcement of community rules. The other board members tried to dismiss my concerns, but I had done my homework. I called for votes of no confidence against each corrupt board member using the proper procedures outlined in the bylaws. "You cannot do this," the former president sputtered. "This is a witch hunt." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. According to Section 12 of our bylaws, any board member can call for a vote of no confidence against another board member if there's evidence of misconduct. The evidence is right here in our own financial records. One by one, I forced votes on each corrupt board member. With my voting power and the support of the disgusted community members, each vote passed overwhelmingly. But I was not done yet. The financial crimes I'd uncovered were not just HOA violations, they were actual criminal offenses. I turned all my documentation over to the district attorney's office. The former president was charged with embezzlement and filing false police reports. The treasurer faced charges for theft of community funds. The secretary was charged with discrimination and abuse of office. The false police reports were particularly serious. Making false reports to law enforcement is a felony, especially when it results in a SWAT response. The prosecutor was very interested in the pattern of harassment that had led up to the hostage hoax. These kinds of false reports waste public resources and can get people killed, the prosecutor told me. We take them very seriously. The former president eventually pled guilty to reduced charges and had to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional fines. He also had to perform community service and was banned from serving on any HOA board in the future. The others faced similar consequences. All told, though, they had to repay over $50,000 in stolen community funds plus legal fees and penalties. With the corrupt board gone, I led the effort to completely rewrite the HOA bylaws. We eliminated provisions that allowed for for discriminatory enforcement and added strong protections for agricultural use and pre-existing properties. The new bylaws included clear procedures for filing complaints and appeals, mandatory financial audits by independent accountants, term limits for board members to prevent the accumulation of power that happened before, explicit protections for properties that predated the HOA, and severe penalties for abuse of office or selective enforcement. We also established a community mediation process for disputes so future conflicts could be resolved without involving law enforcement unless absolutely necessary. The community voted overwhelmingly to adopt the new bylaws. People were grateful that someone had finally stood up to the corruption and restored accountability to their HOA. With the new protections in place, I had accomplished everything I had set out to do. The corrupt board was gone, the harassment had stopped, and my farm was now protected by ironclad legal provisions. At that point, I did something that surprised everyone. I resigned from the board. My job here is done, I announced at the final meeting. I ran for this position to address specific problems, and those problems have been solved. It's time for fresh leadership to guide this community forward. But the best part was yet to come. Under the new bylaws, I exercised my right to opt back out of the HOA entirely. The protections for pre-existing agricultural properties meant I could return to my original excluded status while keeping all the legal safeguards we had put in place. I was back where I started, but with one crucial difference. The HOA could never harass me again. The new bylaws explicitly protected my right to farm, and the community now understood and respected the history of my property. These days I wake up every morning on my family's farm without worrying about harassment letters or false police reports. My chickens lay eggs in peace, and my vegetables grow without interference, and my elderly neighbor has returned to help with the daily chores. The new HOA board is made up of reasonable people who focus on actual community issues instead of power trips and personal vendettas. My great-grandfather would be proud. He bought this land to build something lasting for his family, and I made sure it stays in our family for generations to come. The HOA learned the hard way that you don't mess with a farmer who knows his rights and is not afraid to fight for them. And yeah guys, at what point will HOAs learn that you should never mess with a farmer? If you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. The next one is titled, "An HOA does not allow grass signs for any reason." Also posted on r/MaliciousCompliance. So, a family friend lives in a neighborhood with an HOA. They are not horrible, but they are prickly at times. One year, he hosted a large birthday party and put some temporary signs up. These were for things like what side of the street to park on, where his house was when the party ends, and to come to the backyard instead of in the house. He had approval for the party and a paperwork trail of conversations going back a month. Imagine his surprise when a few days later he gets a $200 fine for those road signs. He contacts the HOA to complain, but he gets stonewalled. As he pays the fine, the guy at the desk says the worst thing: "Next time, read the rules." That ticked him off as he made an effort to follow the rules. The day after, he reads the rules and there's a sentence about all grass signs. Clearly, it is intended to keep those political signs away, but nowhere does it say no political signs. So he takes some time and gets his plan together. He buys some political signs for the local city council members and judges he supports that are up for election. He then tapes them against his car windows so they are on the inside pointing out. For a good measure, he added some bumper stickers for the ACLU, Peace Corps, the Teachers Union, NAACP, whatever that means, and whatever else he could find in an evening. Every so often, he keeps his car at the end of his driveway so all driving into the complex can see. As he put it, it's a petty rebellion, but a rebellion nonetheless. And yeah guys, of course, no matter how small, we support each and every single HOA rebellion. Gotta support the good fight. The next one is titled, "HOA pulled an Uno reverse," posted on r/FHOA. So this is not the typical story you usually find on here, but I think you guys will find it humorous. So for context, I work in the customer service department of a company that still does door-to-door sales. Today I got a call from a gentleman stating that he was the president of his HOA and needed to add the entire HOA to our do not visit list. I kindly explained that I'd be happy to add his address, but I could not add any other addresses without the permission of the individual residents. He then proceeds to tell me that he is the president and I'm going to do it because they voted for this. No sir, I won't. He hangs up on me, then calls back 10 minutes later assuming he will get a different person, but we are a small company and I'm the only one on the phone. I patiently explained to him that our system does not allow us to enter an address without a unique call identifier, and even if I try to enter more than one address, I will get an error message that the address had already been added, even if it hasn't. He begrudgingly admits defeat, or so I thought. I received no less than 120 calls today from this HOA, all asking to have their address added. I got nothing else done, and I'm emotionally exhausted. I had to shut down the chat feature on our website, and when I left today, I still had about 50 unanswered voicemails. If I was not on the receiving end of this, I might actually respect the HOA for this move. And yeah guys, before we end the video, we will read one last funny story from r/petty revenge. It is titled, "My roommate kept eating my snacks, so I filled the bag of chips with broccoli." So, living with a roommate who keeps stealing your snacks is honestly a special kind of hell. I'm not talking about the occasional, oops, I thought it was mine. I mean, every single time I buy chips, they magically disappear within 24 hours. And it's always the good stuff too. Never the oatmeal, never the canned corn, just my chips. I brought it up a couple times and got the usual, "Oh, I thought we were sharing" excuse. We weren't, dude. Well, so one day I decided to try something different. I took an empty bag of sour cream and onion chips, filled it with raw broccoli florets, still cold from the fridge, resealed it, and casually left it on the counter, like bait. Not even an hour later, I hear the bag crinkle, followed by dead silence. Then the sound of the fridge opening, like he was trying to put the broccoli back where it came from. I did not even look up, I just said, hope it was worth it. He has not touched my food since. In fact, he labeled all his snacks now. Broccoli 1, snack thief 0. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please come back tomorrow for more.